Welcome back to the Sick Podcast, Recruits Draftcast. Sorry, Grant. Did I scare you there? Too much energy right off the bat. Yeah, we're back. 4th episode already. We're on a roll, man. We're on a roll. The season, the training camps have yet to start, but there's still plenty to talk about. Here's what we're going to be touching on today. We got Grant. You actually had an interview with Martin Lapointe, scouting director for the Montreal Canadiens. We're gonna need to touch on that for sure. Some very interesting things he said. Listen, the scouts aren't perfect, but sometimes they save your life, right? So we're going to be looking at your best misses. Your worst misses and your best hits in your career. We're also going to be touching on our riser, faller, sleeper, and something new this week. So you don't want to miss it. Let's get started.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. Recruits Draftcast.
And with the first overall selection in the 2023 NHL Draft, the Chicago Blackhawks are very proud to select from the Regina Pats, the Western Hockey League, Connor Bedard.
The sickest NHL draft and scouting podcast. It's gonna be sick.
All right. So if you're not subscribed already, what are you doing? Come on, hit that subscribe button. Go follow us on Twitter for any update, any news that we have. This is your one-stop shop for everything draft and prospect related. We've told you already. We're going to keep hammering it in your head. So, Grant, let's get started with your interview that you did for recruits.ca. Go check it out. With Martin Lapointe, some very interesting things. He was very open about the recent selection with Reinbacher, the thought process of selecting Slafkovsky first overall. Like, what were some highlights from that interview that you can talk about?
Well, I thought it was interesting that, the second paragraph where I quoted him, just what he looks for most in a prospect. And it was interesting that he singled out competitiveness and hockey sense as the two things that he most looks for in a prospect. He even mentioned that if they have those two things in spades, that and the player is a little less skilled than another player that doesn't have those things, as much, he will take the kid with the competitiveness and the hockey sense. It's been reflected in the picks he's made, obviously, I think, with taking Slafkovsky over Wright, taking and more on the competitive end. I wouldn't say that Slafkovsky's smarter than Wright, but in their draft years, at least, Slafkovsky demonstrated that he has a strong will to win. And in the big games, Marty puts a lot of stock in playoff games and big games. He says that's where they perform in their draft year is very important because, just about every game's big in Montreal. There's a microscope on you every game, so you have to have a strong backbone, he said, and he thinks that both Slafkovsky and Reinbacher have that, and it was a factor in selecting those guys. So, greatest fan base in the world and all that, but also being the most fervent and passionate means that players that are picked have to be able to handle the scrutiny and the pressure, and it's a factor in players that they pick. They're trying to pick guys that when there's ups and downs, when there's downs, that they can handle the scrutiny that comes with it. And we'll see. It'll take a few years before we know if they made the right choices or not. But certainly, I think it was a big factor in them taking certain players that they took over other ones, including Reinbacher over Michkov.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? You're drafting to win the Stanley Cup. You're not drafting to be first in the division in the regular season, right? You want competitors. You want guys that'll go to war, that want to win. So, as a fundamental skill that can't be taught. That's what you're looking for in a prospect first and foremost. That's no shocker. But I'm happy that, you know, Marty emphasized on that. It's a very important factor. I also appreciated how he talked about why they didn't pick Wright or they didn't pick Michkov, right? Usually they talk about more so why they picked the guy that they picked. But then he explained a little bit that they thought Shane Wright plateaued, right? That his progression is almost complete in a sense, where the potential to grow is not really there compared to a guy like Slafkovsky, which can grow into something insane, right? And then with Michkov, what I thought was interesting was he singled out the fact that they don't have control over his development in the KHL. And we saw recently, Grant, you pointed it out on Twitter, how he, you know, after one mistake, he got benched basically the rest of the game. So I mean, the Flyers in that sense should be pretty pissed or concerned, I guess, since that team, the SKA team, has full control over what they do with Michkov, right? That's a pretty big concern.
Yeah, and I emphasized that quite a bit in the draft guide and on Twitter over before the draft, that you don't have control over his development really for 3 years. We saw it with Romanov to a certain degree. The 2 years that after he was drafted, he'd go to the World Juniors and be a superstar, and then go back to his club team and play 7-8 minutes a lot of nights. Where I'm watching those games, and frankly, I thought he was the best defenseman on that team, and yet they don't, as a rule, play the younger guys a lot. They really make them sit on the bench a lot, especially their first 2 years, which is again one of the reasons why Demidov, as they pronounce it in the games that I've been watching in Russia, he plays a pile there, and he's a year younger than Michkov. So the fact that he gets a regular shift, he's regular on the power play, they even have him killing penalties, just tells you just how impressive this kid is.
Jeez. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if you haven't yet, go subscribe to recruits.ca for the whole interview, right? That's all we'll give. Just a little snippet, but really good stuff and more stuff coming, Grant. Can you tease anything? Like, do you have any other interviews to tease?
Well, whenever the NHL finally gets around, have they announced yet officially about Mailloux being reinstated? If they did, I missed it. But
official. I think it's Renaud Lavoie from TV Sport who came out and said that it's basically done. Right. But I don't know that we'll get an official statement to be continued. I don't know.
Well, yeah, and I kind of, you know, I got it confirmed from the source, you know, that he's approved, but
okay.
The club still wants me to hang on to that article that I wrote 2 months ago on Mailloux that I will publish when it's official. So all of my subscribers that have been waiting for that article to come out, just be a little more patient. We're just waiting for the official word from Bettman and company before I will publish it. That's the big one.
Sounds like a plan. I'm looking forward to it, Grant, and I know a lot of people are. Now, if we move on to a little spicy stuff. Now, you are generous enough to divulge what your greatest or worst misses have been thus far. Players that you thought were sure locks that didn't really pan out. So, give us some names. Who do you got?
Yeah, well, through the years, there's every scout has hits and misses, and I think 2017 was the first year that I had Recruits podcast and Recruits website, and I did my first rankings, you know, first draft guide. And it's interesting going back to that one because that that one, I think, demonstrates as strongly as any just how you're right about some guys, you're wrong about others. Nobody gets it perfect. I had, and it was quite early on that I ranked Hischier ahead of Nolan Patrick, and got a lot of flack for it at the time. I think it was November of the draft year. I just wasn't. Patrick was bothering me. His play away from the puck, especially. He just didn't seem to have any regard for competing without the puck, and I thought he was lazy, and I was concerned that he was plateauing a bit too, just like Shane Wright in his draft year. I ended up, and it's funny because I had some scouts at the end kind of talked me out of dropping Patrick even further. I ended up ranking him third, and I put Heiskanen ahead of him. Hischier first, Heiskanen second, Patrick third, even though I wanted Makar and Makar fourth. Now, Makar ended up going fourth. Yeah. So it's not like, I made a mistake and the NHL teams didn't, but clearly at this point, you'd pick them one or two if you did a redraft. I would argue that Heiskanen, different players, but and other than the fantastic year, obviously, that Makar had, where he won the all the trophies and the cup. I think Heiskanen probably had a better career so far overall. Not matching his point totals, but just all around, just a fantastic defenseman. So, as far as I'm concerned, those two guys should have been 1-2, and yeah. I got Heiskanen right, having him ahead of Patrick, obviously. So that looked good. But then fifth ranked, I had Cody Glass. Okay. And he hasn't worked out yet. There was skating, everyone loved his playmaking. But there was a little bit of a concern with the skating, and there's one guy that, he's cracked it now, but at the end of the day, I had him ahead of Pettersson. Now, and it was a learning experience for me. I loved Pettersson at the start of the year. He was in Allsvenskan and he looked great. And I remember texting a scout and saying, "This guy looks top 5." And he said, "Yeah, blah, blah, blah." He was really skinny, and he still is, but he wore down as the year went on. And the second half, his stats reflected it and his play reflected it. He wasn't nearly as good. And I always put emphasis on the playoffs and such. And I docked him quite a bit and ended up ranking him 15th, which, if you if you were to do it again, you'd say, well, there obviously you got one up. So, but it was a learning experience where you don't necessarily, you got to remember the good games and where, how good in the really good games, just how good he looked and how much potential there is there. And the fact that kid can maybe get worn down playing as an 18-year-old in a men's league, and don't necessarily put too much stock in that, because you saw the skill. I saw the skill. I had him top 5 and slowly kept dropping him as the year went along. Even though there were some scouts saying, "Oh no, he's still top 10." I was a little bullheaded about it, and said, "No, I think he's going to have durability issues in the NHL, and playoff time. Is he going to be great?" So far he hasn't. Vancouver hasn't made the playoffs for any length of time, and he's had a couple injuries, but he should have been top 5, obviously. Well, ahead of Patrick, he should have been top 3, probably ahead of Hischier too. So, but then again, rounding out my top 10, I had Robert Thomas in the top 10. Now,
that's a hit.
Thomas dropped to 20 on draft day. St. Louis got him. I was actually, and I remember I texted Trevor during the draft because I was getting excited. I knew Trevor really liked him too. And unquestionably, if he had dropped to 25 or 26 where the Habs were picking, 25, I think it was, that would have been that was their guy. So he almost dropped to the Habs, and that there'd certainly be no center issues now if they had Robert Thomas. He's already a point per game guy, right? But there were a lot of draft lists that had him outside the top 20, and I couldn't believe it based on what I'd been watching all year. So there's another example of me getting it right. And also I had Suzuki top 10. Loved them. I saw a game against London where he had 6 points, and he was the best player on the ice by far. And this was his draft year. There were issues about how physical he was. Would he take hitting? His skating. I did not see those issues as the season went on, and ranked him accordingly. So that just one draft rate alone just goes to show you how you can look like a genius 1 minute and like the village idiot the next, right? So it's as Marty said in that article, like it's an inexact science, and that draft alone was a prime example of that. Now, there have been other. I didn't have Yakupov ranked first. I don't know of anyone else that, certainly publicly, that didn't. But I had issues with him away from the puck, especially. And I'll always be proud of that one because I mean, obviously he busted, he busted, right?
Pretty hard.
I had Galchenyuk. I had Galchenyuk number 1. That year.
That 2012 draft was weird, man. It was weird. Like aside from Morgan Riley, Philip Forsberg, it was strange draft.
Yeah, it was. And Forsberg, all the scouts I talked to had issues with his skating. Well, they don't have issues with his skating now, Yeah. Griffin Reinhart going 4th overall shocked me just because you watched him and it just, there were issues there. Ryan Murray had the knee problems and stuff, so you understand that a bit. But I had Teravainen 2nd overall.
Wow, that's good. That's good.
Loved his potential. Points wise, he's I think top 5 from that draft class, and even Galchenyuk still is, believe it or not. But that's going to change as time goes along. But I mean, his first 3 or 4 years, he was a top point producer from that draft class, and it looked there certainly was nobody, no Habs fans, and it's funny how everybody now Captain Hindsight, right? Why did they pick Galchenyuk? They weren't saying that 3 or 4 years after he was drafted. They loved it. In fact, it was the opposite. Why isn't he playing first line center or second line center? They're ruining him and such. And even when he was traded for Domi, the vast majority of fans thought it was just terrible. That how could you give up a player with so much potential? Galchenyuk's going to be a 40-goal superstar. Well, no, it didn't. Showed that Bergevin had some inside info on that when it came to that he wasn't, he didn't know him better than anybody. That was that dealing him when they did was perfect timing. Even I remember Ray Ferraro, who I respect so much, he's rarely wrong, I think, in his opinions, was saying, Galchenyuk, that's a bad trade for the Habs because Galchenyuk has so much talent and skill. So I don't, at the time, both him and Riley played less than 10 games that year. it was such a bad draft year that they both ended up going in the top, top 6 or 5 or whatever it was. It just went to show you how poor a draft it was compared to some others. Erik Karlsson, I ranked top 10. That's when I first started out. I was with McKean's and saw the under 18 tournament at the end of the year. I mean, it was strictly on a few videos, but you could see the talent there. It was just he had puck skills that were just amazing. So he was 150 pounds, 155 pounds at the time, maybe 5'11". So typically at the time, the Eric Goodbransons were getting picked top 3, and the 155-pound Swedish defenseman wasn't getting picked in the first round at all. So it was going out on a limb to a certain extent. And the NHL, like they didn't pick him till 15th overall. But that was a great, obviously, Ottawa. The funny story behind that, Brian Burke, the Anaheim staff really liked Erik Karlsson, the scouts. And Brian overruled a bit on that. He said, taking a 155-pound Swedish defenseman, that high, and moved back a couple spots in the draft and took Gardner. I think it was Gardner, the high school defenseman, instead. Well, Gardner Karlsson, who Gardner didn't win the Norris last year, put it that way. So that there's one example of where the GM overruling didn't necessarily pan out, just like the GM overruling in with Nolan Patrick, when the scouting staff preferred Heiskanen and McCarr to Patrick. So you hire scouts, and the scouts are out beating the Paz. And I've always maintained that unless the GM gets to see a prospect a lot, that not to overrule, to let the guys that the designated roles that they have do their job. So
exactly,
those are a couple examples. So anyways, I've leaned a little bit towards hits that over misses, but certainly, though, you remember the hits a lot more than you remember the misses. I gotta say. So there's a few examples for you.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you mentioned to let the scouts hold some decision power, right? And that's what Marty Lapointe said in the interview. It said that him and Nick Bobrov actually make the decision, right? Kent and Jeff have their input, they ask their questions, right? But at the end of the day, it is Marty and Nick Bobrov that make the decision of who they pick. And I mean, time will tell if that was the right call and all that, but very interesting. And I do agree that,
well, you look
scouts know best. That's their job.
Yeah. Well, you look at Louis LeBlanc as an example. I don't know that, I know Trevor really liked Chris Kreider. And I mean, Habs fans don't like Chris Kreider now, but
imagine if he was on the Habs,
he wouldn't have,
exactly.
he wouldn't have ran into Carey Price if he was on the Habs, right? I mean, unless it happened in practice or something like that. But I mean, who would you rather have? A guy that scored 50 goals last year, or 6'3", 2 years ago, or Louis, Louis LeBlanc, who unfortunately never panned out. But the pressure, the draft was in Montreal, the French Canadian kid. I think there was some arm twisting go on there a little bit,
Good.
Although I always do defend. I mean, Bob McKenzie's list. I'll always remember. I remember him doing his show, and I think he had LeBlanc 14th on his list, and the Habs got him at 18. And when they picked him, they said he could end up being one of the steals of the draft. So there was certainly, it's not like they went way out on a limb to get him.
Yeah,
he was picked right. You know, he was ranked by everyone in the teens somewhere. So, but I do know that Trevor loved Kreider, and if it had been completely left up to him, I do think that that would have been his pick.
Oh, what could have been? What could have been? That hurts. That hurts. Speaking on the Habs, let's get to it, man. We got a new thing. You know, we know our fan base. We know who's watching. Mostly Habs fans, right? Grant, you create some fantastic Habs content. You know, I've been involved in Habs content as well. So we'll do something new this week and for weeks to come. The Habs prospect of the week. Now, most prospects aren't playing yet, but there is one goaltender, right? The Habs drafted 3 goaltenders this past draft. The last one was Yevgeny Volokhin, and we have some footage. He is the Habs prospect of the week. Let's take a look.
Yeah, he's got really good pads. You'll notice just about all of the. I looked at all of his saves from the preseason. He's played 6 games. He's given up 5 goals in those 6 games.
Wow.
His save percentage is over .960. Just you notice just about every impressive save that he makes is with those pads. He's got excellent pads and also rebound control. He tends to get it over. I think you'll see it on this one right there, right to the defenseman off his pad. You know, he plays for I don't even know how you pronounce these Russian team names. Mamonte Ugly. I don't know why they have 2 or 3 words in there. Like it's tough to find prospects because there's about 6 teams with the same name, but they've got an extra syllable in there or something like SKA. I don't know how many SKA teams there are. One's Nevy, St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg.
I have fallen for that before, where you're trying to watch a game and you have the game on, and wait a sec, this is the wrong SKA team. This is one of the other 6. They don't allow a lot of shots. These guys, just about every save that he's made in the preseason has been from the blue line. So it's a little bit tempered, my enthusiasm for him, but the fact is that he had back-to-back shutouts. The fact is he has 3 shutouts in 6 games. You can't argue with that. That's pretty impressive. So there weren't a lot of Habs prospects playing in the last few weeks, so you know it was a minimal number of options. But you have to give the nod to the Russian kid, and if he has a goals against average under 1 a game, and you know, shutout every second game, that'll be pretty impressive. So hopefully he keeps this up and gets a look at the KHL level this year.
Yeah,
but typically goalies that young don't get too much time in the K. Philip Eriksson would be the runner up. Don't have a clip of him, but he was a first line center for Sweden in this U20 tournament that they just held in Nyköping, I think it was, Sweden. Basically teams B squads as far as the U20. I think it give an opportunity for a lot of for them to look at kids who are either on the bubble or not quite, that aren't favored to be on the World Junior team. He only played a dozen games last year or something like that, so the Swedes want to get a good look at him. Played first line center, picked up several assists on the power play. He was the first on the first power play, so he might, if he gets off to a really good start into his junior year, he might be under consideration for the World Junior team. But it'd be more likely that it'd be next year that they'd be looking at having him on the team. But impressive tournament for him, and I think he was a 6th round pick, if I'm not mistaken.
He was far.
Looks like
far,
it could turn out to be good value for the Canadiens.
Interesting. If we can go on a quick goalie tangent for a second. I know you're no goalie expert and you don't really, scout them all that much, understandably so, but I mean, I need to know why there's so many Russian goaltending superstars, right? You Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Sorokin, Bobrovsky, Samson. I could just keep listing them off. There's so many good Russian goaltenders. What about their system or their upbringing, their development makes it so that they're this good? I need to know the secret sauce.
Yeah. I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's cyclical to a certain degree. Like a while back, it was Finnish goalies that were, they were producing tons of, and now you can't buy a Finnish goalie, Czechs, the Hasek era, and then typically there's one really good goalie, and all the young goalies want to. All the young athletes in that country, I want to be the next Patty Waugh. There was a rash of Quebec-born goalies for the next 15 years that because they, all the best athletes in Quebec idolized Patrick Waugh. Well, I'm going to become a goalie. I want to be the next Patrick Waugh. So there's that. That would be the best explanation I could have for that. But it tends to be cyclical too. Like 20 years ago, who were the great Russian goalies 20 years ago? It was Czech goalies and it was Finnish goalies, and now it's Russia's turn for whatever reason. But yeah, there must be some super goalie developer that we don't know of that maybe a team should hire in the NHL to come and develop their goalies. I'm not really sure, but that is a great question.
That's it. I mean, we're not saying that Volokhin is going to develop to be the next, Vasilevsky or anything, but it is interesting, to see all these Russian goaltenders dominate the league. Like, they are the best goaltenders. You can add, a few Americans, right? Hellebuck, Ottinger, pretty good, but it's really like it's Russia's turn right now. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
If we get into our weekly segment of Riser, Faller, Sleeper, Prospect of the Week, we start with our Riser, Colin Ralph. Tell us a bit about this guy.
6'3" defenseman that plays at Shattuck, St. Mary's. When I was doing my Riser last week, Latourneau, I helped but notice this kid because he the one game that I did on Latourneau, the main game, it was him that was that stood out and actually stopped Latourneau a few times. Here's one here. Here's Latourneau coming up on.
Yeah.
Up.
We had that clip last week too.
Oh, here it is here.
Boom, boom. Okay.
Knocked him down. So, I mean, Latourneau's a 6'5" kid, right? And they're both 16 here, so it's interesting. But he eliminates guys. Great mobility. I love his pivots and his puck retrievals. No nonsense. He's not going to get a lot of points, but this guy could be a shutdown defender. He's just, he gets it. He gets it out of the zone. He gets back, gets the puck, and you can you just see the puck retrieval, the skating. I love his pivots. Love his size. Love his poise. I assume he's back at Shattuck this year, and I mean he was dominant. Nobody can get past him along the boards. You try to beat him on the outside, and good luck. You're stopped. And that was at 16. So
yeah.
I've been told that the NHL scouts really love this kid, and I can see why. Here you see the skating ability, for that size and that age to move like that. Again, eliminates a guy. It's almost impossible to get around him. Check out this hit.
Boom. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shut down the Fender potential. I'm going to have him in my first round. I'm going to do rankings. I'm going to do a preliminary top 32. I'd like to get it out before our next podcast, and we'll discuss that next week. So a preliminary top 32. I'm comfortable enough. I've seen enough that there's 32 kids that I think worthy of being in the first round at this point, and it'll be the earliest that I've ever done a top 32 rankings. But hey, I've got a draft podcast now, so I got to give the people what they want, as Ray Davies once said with the Kings.
Yeah, good stuff. So Colin Ralph, name to keep in mind. That's good stuff. Faller this week is a guy that many people have in their top 10, who's still projected to go for first round, but Consta Helenius. Talk to us about him.
Well, again, the Faller thing. This is more just I don't have him in my top 10, but a lot of people do right now. And here, this demonstrates just a few instances in the last game, U20 game that I watched, of why. He's got to get a lot stronger, and his play away from the puck for a center that size, you really have to be, as Marty Lapointe pointed out, you have to be competitive. You really do.
Yeah.
And I'm a little like, look at how lazy on the back check always bothers me. It's especially if you're not a big, you're not a big kid and you're playing center. Pace is so important. You got to bust your butt getting back. And I saw a lot of instances where he wasn't necessarily doing that. And it's a little bit of a concern, but there again, he gets knocked down fairly easily. I'm just a little concerned about whether this kid's going to be a top 2 NHL center. He may end up being on the wing, but I understand why he's highly ranked. The kid's got really good skating skills, and he's just kind of lackadaisical, put it that way,
floating
on the without the puck, and that's going to have to change if he wants to. Because NHL, here's an example of a skill. So I threw that in at the end, just I mean, it's with an asterisk. He can definitely be. There's top 10 talent there, but at his size, playing center, want to see better all around game, more competitiveness, and certainly he's capable of that. And if we see that as the year goes on, he'll get back up into the top 10. But I don't necessarily say that he's a faller. He's a guy that I don't think right now is in my top 10, like is worthy of being in my top 10, but certainly the potential is there for him to move back up.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Moving on to our sleeper pick of the week, Mr. Lucas Lagerberg. Tell us about him.
I ranked him top 100 last year. 6'1" defenseman. He was a year. He was draft eligible 2 years ago. He was second in scoring among defensemen in the Swedish juniors last year, more than a point a game. And you can see by these highlights, like he walks the line great. He's got very good, look at that lateral agility. But really, he puts the puck right on the stick, right where you want to one time it. Like, he's got really accurate passing skills, very good vision, like his skating. He's a very good skater. Just with the puck moving defenseman. I was surprised he wasn't drafted last year, because he's, you see a lot of, especially CHL defensemen that aren't that good defensively, that get picked in the first round or top 50 because of their offensive skills. Well, why would it be different for this kid? There's the goal he scored. He had a goal.
That's nice.
And 4 assists in this U20 tournament that was just held. He was part of that. He played with Eriksson and part of that B team. So they're looking at him. I think he worked himself into the discussion to be on the World Junior team for Sweden with his tournament. He was, as far as I'm concerned, the best defenseman in that tournament. And I don't understand why he didn't get drafted, especially after watching this tournament and just seeing how he's, in my mind, the best. He was the best prospect in that tournament. And I think, this is his last chance, right? The teams will look at him a little more seriously this year. I think he was under the radar last year, and that if NHL scouts get to see him a little more often, and he can show that he can play at least a little physically, defending wise, that I can see him getting picked this time around in the draft.
Very interesting. Keep an eye on Lucas Lagerberg from Sweden. Next guy, obviously, we've talked about him before. We've talked about him in this show already. Prospect of the week is none other than Ivan Demidov.
Yeah, he just keeps putting up good point totals. Like look, you see the edge on that? That's just
elite.
It doesn't almost do justice to just how good he is on his edges. Look at this. I love the little. He's got great skill. Here's the goal he scored the other day. Just puts it right in between the goalie's arm and the armpit, right through the armpit, basically. He's got a great shot, and his puck skills. Like I said earlier, and here's a great pass, and you'll see it quickly. The second, boom, right on the tape. His coach, KHL coach, loves him. Like, he's playing him 15 minutes a game, and Demidov's been getting 5. Michkov's been getting 5. Yeah. Last 4 or 5 games. He's a year younger. Michkov's supposed to be the future star. Well, if this kid's better, and I do think he is in a lot of ways, wow. I think I said it before and I'll say it again, I think he's the Russian forward prospect since Ovechkin. So I'm very excited by him.
Oh, baby. We're not done talking about this guy, that's for sure. And if you want to hear more about Mr. Demidov, you can hit the subscribe button. Go follow us on Twitter, SickPod NHL Draft. And with that, thank you, Grant. We'll see you all next week.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, Recruits Draftcast on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.